Yeah, so let me kick this off with the Market Watch article here. So, Market Watch opinion piece says corporations have broken capitalism. Here's how to fix it. Ultimately, the crux of this article, written by Hunter Hastings, was asking the question, why are young Americans so skeptical about capitalism? And pointed out in a recent survey from Pew Research, only 40% of 18 to 29-year-olds expressed a positive attitude towards capitalism, and a greater number were positive towards socialism. As entrepreneurs, as business leaders, us and our listeners, how do we begin to sort of navigate this conversation? Why are the youth losing their way to misunderstand really what gives them the space to be successful in this nation?
I mean, I have a very specific perspective on this, which is, I think it's funny, right? So the nature of where we're at today is directly a byproduct of what's come from the federal government by way of their monetary policy, right? Inflation at all-time highs, occurring $1 trillion in debt every 90 days. We just passed another $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that'll only last us till October. Mm-hmm. And all of those things are compounding because I think everybody can attest to this, no matter what income bracket you're in, things are just generally more expensive. So the plug for socialism says, well, I want the government to step in and help me, because look at, they spend $1 trillion every quarter to help all these other, federally funded type of things, not realizing that the same person they're asking to give them the cure is the same person who created the poison in the first place, right? But in the middle of that, somehow the media has contorted the idea that all of this is the byproduct of capitalists and entrepreneurs, when in reality, they're all just taking advantage of the monetary policy that has been created by the federal government. That's not to say that some of these corporations aren't participating in crony capitalism and they're experiencing the highest benefit because they're closest to the money. That's not to say that. But to just throw the baby out with the bathwater and just say capitalism is bad because look at Google is a really, really bad take, because 70% of the employment market and the economy is made up of small business owners, right? Not huge multi-billion-dollar organizations. That's real capitalism. And so, the generation of 18 to 29, this is all they've ever really known is cheap money practices, uber inflation, coming out of circa, call it, 2008, right? So my sister's 24. I would say she falls into that camp. She was born in 2000. She kind of lived through the 2008 crisis with my parents, who were directly impacted by that. And so coming out of the other side of that, I think that she probably has a pretty bad taste in her mouth that, oh, look, it was the bad guys with the money. Well, the banks and the Federal Reserve, which is not actually a federally funded government institution, the Federal Reserve, it's a conglomerate of banks, Federal Reserve, federal government, all working together to try to manipulate the free market to do what they wanted to do, to quote unquote have a soft landing like they're trying to do right now. And so it's just ill-educated, misguided, I would say youthful people who have no real knowledge or historical research in and around what they're even freaking talking about. Because we were talking about this before the pod. Socialism, historically, has it ever worked out?
Not once.
Exactly.
I mean, it's easy. That's the plainest, simplest answer is never, not once. It's not that it hasn't worked. It's that it can't work. Human nature just doesn't support it.
Correct. Because you end up with a small group of people who control all the power, money, and everybody has the best of intentions until they realize they can vote themselves a raise, right?
So how do business owners navigate working with a workforce that might have maybe overexposed to socialist ideas?
Yeah, I mean, as entrepreneurs, that's tough, right? Because you want to be unbiased, and there's some good talent amongst that 18 to 29-year-old pool. But I would say today, and you've heard me talk about this before, but culture fit matters more than ever. And so a lot of these people don't realize that the things that they're spewing online and the things that they're putting in their bios and whatnot are removing them from the employment pool. And I think employers are being a lot more particular and doing a lot more research about who they're bringing on before they pull that trigger. Where previously, you could get talent, money was cheap, and you could hire at will and fire at will, and it really didn't affect you. But one bad hire that turns into a fire costs you $100,000, right? So I think
as an occasional employment litigator, it can certainly cost you more than $100,000 on one bad hire.
Correct.
But I have some thoughts on that.
That's why you're here.
I guess that's true. It's not, to me, exclusively about just choosing somebody that's a fit. It's about being the leader that your organization requires to take the talent that you have, or that you find somebody with a skill set that you need and you bring them in, and maybe culturally they're not the best fit. Well, then that's your role to step into, in my view. And again, speaking on my own behalf, you're going to fill the role of what their parents should have filled. And you can educate them in a way that kind of informs them, hey, socialism has never worked. But if you just start with that as your premise and the way that you present that idea to your employee, they're going to struggle, because they're going to put up some walls, because they've been hearing it from middle-aged white dudes their entire life that, hey, capitalism is the answer, not socialism.
So you called Darius?
That's it. Exactly.
Black guy?
Well,
that's what I needed.
What I identify as?
Oh, I'm sorry for judging your race.
You don't know.
But the education role, I think, can be done in a really positive way for entrepreneurs specifically. And that's talking about, hey, look, the level of your output, how hard you work, but it's not, I guess, how hard you work is probably an ill-fitting measure. How much do you bring to the business? How much can you contribute? And watching them.
And how much risk have you actually taken on to get to this point?
And watching those people kind of learn those lessons, and you say, hey, if you become more invaluable to my company, I'm going to pay you more. And then you're not going to need to receive the exact equity that a lot of people are looking for. I'm making the same, person A, person B, and person C. Are we all making the same salary? It's like, well, if I'm person B and I'm bringing more to the business than A and C, I want to get paid more. And when you start seeing that manifest in your bank account and in the way that you get to live your life and the way that you're valued by your organization, you see that inherently there's value in competition. And that allows you to make that shift to, hey, well, if that works in your life, and if you've seen that with your own experiences, should that maybe reflect your governmental views and views on how we should structure our society? And I think that pushes people towards capitalism without having to shove it down their throat.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point. Being a great leader, because there's a misconception that like all people who own businesses are just super greedy, when in reality the average small business owner makes $65,000 a year, right? So that's just simply not true. So you can do a better job of educating them on that topic. But I think the big take is, the risk. Who's taking on the most risk? In socialism, the risk is really low. When the risk is really low, so is the reward. So is the reward, right? And also the innovation, right? Because if there's no potential, the greater the downside risk, the greater the upside potential. Socialism just flatlines all of that and says, it doesn't matter how smart you are, or how great of a product you innovate, or how much you create or add value to the market, your upside is always limited.
And that's what I was talking about with the human nature aspect of socialism, and why I believe it's destined to fail every time it's tried. Is the one thing that's consistent about humans is if you incentivize something, you're going to get more of it. That's just the way it works.
Incentivize mediocrity.
That's it.
More mediocrity.
If you incentivize somebody to just be a company man, say yes, put your head down at work, don't ever come up with an idea, don't ever think outside the box, don't ever take risk. You know what? You're going to have a really stable workforce. And that might be great if the government is designing every single step of the way, if they planned it exactly right. They never have. I don't believe they ever will.
Right.
But if you incentivize people to take risks, to become owners, to truly grab life by the horns, you're going to watch the innovation just fly. And I think that that's what we've seen at various times in American society.
I also think that the generation has been fooled into thinking that by getting a degree, that guarantees that they'll get a quote unquote high paying job. And I would say that was probably true 15 to 20 years ago. But now it's a commodity. Everybody has a degree. So now you're seeing more people with master's degrees. Like that's the thing that separates people. But then as an employer, you have somebody who's just been in school for the last 7-8 years, right? Versus the person who's actually out there grinding away. So I think there's a gross misconception about how successful and how much money you'll be making in your first 10 years out of school. It takes about 10 years in an industry or sector or in the workforce to really develop the proper knowledge, attitude, skills, and habits of successful people who make high dollar amount. And so, it's just a sign of the times where we're at, and something that we have to navigate as employers and entrepreneurs. But on the positive, I think we're coming to the tail end of this. We're ushering out the old hat, which is the boomer generation that have generally led, and the new gen, the millennials, who make up the largest segment of the workforce and entrepreneurship, are stepping up to the helm. And we've kind of been through this already, right? We've spent the last 20 years of our careers figuring it out and dealing with all these challenges, paying back our student loans and realizing that it's hard.
Yep.
It is really freaking hard. So,
Well, as we transition, so we're going to talk about Trump and the jury selection, but whenever anyone talks about high paying jobs, you want to know what actually goes through my head?
what's that?
Is I've logged over the last 4 years how many times I've seen from Joe Biden and the administration the term good paying jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever noticed that? I was talking about good paying jobs. Like just watch it from now on as we get to this further media cycle with the election. Just how often the phrase good paying jobs comes out of the mouth of Joe Biden.
Interesting.
It's just something I noticed. And whenever I hear high paying jobs, it always triggers that. So I got some PTSD there or something with that.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes to show you how disconnected from the market they actually are. Man in the high castle.
Right.
Well, and when you're going to argue that the change from, like California just made from a $15 to $20 minimum wage, and you're going to talk about that as a good paying job.
Yeah.
It's like, what a false bill of goods to sell somebody that, hey, $20 an hour is a good paying job.
Yeah. Well, in our last episode, we talked about all the 99-cent stores going out of business.
Mm-hmm.
They pay their employees like $27 an hour, but the median income for an employee at 99-cent stores was $31,000 a year. They're primarily in California. You cannot live on $31,000 a year in California. No way.
No.
That'll get you through the first quarter.
Yeah, maybe if you live on a street.